Welcome to episode 2 of Pulp Era Story Reviews. In this episode, we won't be reviewing a specific story, but covering the origin of a character who is probably the best known crime fighter to come out of the Pulp era. The Shadow, the coolest character of the Pulp magazine era, and possibly the coolest character ever created. His first appearance as an actual protagonist in a story was in April 1931 when the first issue of the Shadow magazine appeared on newsstands. But before he was a hero, he was merely a voice on the radio. Now pay attention because this is a little convoluted. In 1930, the magazine publisher Street and Smith began to sponsor a radio show called Street and Smith's Detective Story Hour. This was an anthology show that dramatized stories taken from the Street and Smith's Detective Story magazine. It was meant to be a vehicle to promote that magazine. To host the show, the writers created the Shadow, who acted as narrator and occasionally as the voice of conscience, echoing inside the mind of a killer. Played initially by James Licurto, the role of the Shadow was soon taken over by Frank Reddick. With a sinister voice and the world's creepiest laugh, Reddick soon became the most memorable part of the Detective Story Hour. In fact, he was so good, he successfully generated interest in the wrong magazine. People started to ask newsstand vendors not for Detective Story magazine, but for that magazine with the Shadow, or for the Shadow magazine. In 1931, that was all the market research a publisher needed. If their readers wanted a Shadow magazine, then by golly, Street and Smith would give them one. Veteran writer Walter Gibson was brought in to flesh out an appropriate character. All he had to start with was the creepy ambiance and the laugh, but Gibson built on that and came up with a truly exciting character who would star in over 300 novels. The Shadow, as he appeared in the Shadow magazine, was a mysterious figure who would investigate crime and remain hidden in darkness until the moment he pounced upon criminals, his twin automatics blazing. He had a number of agents stationed around New York City, a cab driver, a few former criminals, a newspaper reporter, and others who would gather information, work undercover, and jump into gun battles when needed, though the Shadow was more than capable of battling villainy on his own when need be. He scaled the sides of skyscrapers with the aid of specially designed suction cups, and he took to the air in his gyrocopter, pursuing evil no matter where it tried to hide. The Shadow had a wide range of skills. Clad in a black cloak and slouch hat, he was able to blend into any handy patch of darkness and become effectively invisible. He was a skilled detective. He was an expert with both firearms and in unarmed combat. He could disguise himself to look like just about anyone and could mimic voices perfectly. He could pick locks and use sleight of hand tricks. He often employed other magician tricks to fool his enemies or to escape from the many death traps in which he found himself. Gibson was an incredibly prolific writer. Using the pen name Maxwell Grant, he eventually wrote 283 of the 325 Shadow novels that would see print from 1931 to 1949. That's a total of about 15 million words. And though several other writers would contribute some good stories, it was Gibson who defined the Shadow in his mythology. He was a great writer who deftly tied together traditional elements of mystery and deduction with wonderfully exciting action sequences. Gibson tossed the Shadow into wild adventures involving thugs, spies, mad scientists, and maniacal killers. His plots were solid and logical and were packed with gunfights, chases, and rescues. The events of the novels were described in clear, straightforward prose that never wandered off unnecessarily. Gibson had a talent for producing astonishing plot twists, often keeping his readers guessing as to exactly what was going on until the last moment. And that's pretty much it for the Shadow right now. A character who was not only made of pure awesome, but also had an awesome inner filling, an outer coating of awesome, was dipped in awesome sauce, and had awesome sprinkles on top. Now, episode 3 of this series will be a review of a specific Shadow novel. I haven't decided which one yet, but I will soon, and I hope to have the video ready soon. But until then, you can visit me at my blog, comics, old-time radio, and other cool stuff.